The message traveled across the darkness of space at the speed of light. It moved past dead planets and dying stars. It crossed distances that would take 1,000 human lifetimes to travel. The transmission carried only one voice, but behind that voice stood 8 billion souls united in a single purpose. Ambassador stood in the ruins of what was once New York City. Behind her, the broken skeleton of the Statue of Liberty lay half buried in ash and rubble. She wore no protective suit despite the radiation. It did not matter anymore. Nothing mattered except the words she was about to speak. The collective had first contacted Earth 47 years ago. They came with promises of friendship and knowledge. Their ships appeared in the skies above every major city, massive and beautiful, shining like silver moons. Humanity had celebrated. They had danced in the streets. They had believed that they were no longer alone in the universe. Remembered that day. She had been only 7 years old, holding her father's hand as they watched the ships descend over Madrid. Her father had cried tears of joy. He had said that this was the beginning of a new age for humanity. He had been wrong. They were patient creatures. They did not rush. They did not attack. Instead, they offered trade agreements and cultural exchanges. They shared some of their technology, enough to make humanity dependent on them. They learned human languages and customs. They smiled their strange smiles and spoke of eternal partnership. Nobody noticed when the first demands began. Small things at first: exclusive mining rights to certain asteroids, access to specific research facilities, permission to establish bases on the moon. Humanity agreed because they had given so much. It seemed only fair to give something back. General had been the first to raise the alarm. He was a quiet man who had spent his career studying military strategy and alien behavior patterns. He presented his findings to the United Nations Security Council in a closed session. He showed them the pattern. Every species that had contacted followed the same path: partnership, dependence, submission, and finally extinction. They did not conquer through war. They conquered through patience. The Security Council had dismissed him. They called him paranoid and xenophobic. 3 months later, General disappeared. His family received a message saying he had died in an accident. His body was never found. Had known, he had been her mentor and friend. His disappearance was what had driven her into politics. She had climbed the ranks with a single goal in mind. She needed to understand the truth about and she needed to prepare humanity for what was coming. 20 years passed. The presence on Earth grew stronger. They had ambassadors in every government. Their technology powered human cities. Their medicine cured diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. Anyone who spoke against them was labeled a conspiracy theorist. Anyone who questioned their motives was ridiculed and silenced. Then came the decree of integration. They announced that humanity was ready to join the collective fully. They presented it as an honor, the greatest gift they could offer. Human governments would be dissolved. Human armies would be disbanded. Human culture would be preserved in museums. Humanity would become part of something greater than themselves. Stood before the world and said no. She was not alone. Across the planet, millions of voices joined hers. They had been preparing in secret for years. Underground networks of scientists and soldiers. Hidden weapons factories buried deep beneath mountains. Plans that had been passed from one generation to the next. Humanity had learned this game, and they had been playing it too. The Supreme Council was surprised. They had expected resistance from individuals but not from entire nations. They offered compromises. They made threats. They promised rewards to those who would betray their own kind. Some humans accepted, most did not. The first warship entered Earth's atmosphere 6 months after the rejection of the decree. It hovered over Beijing, casting a shadow that covered the entire city. The message was clear: submit or be destroyed. Beijing did not submit. Neither did Shanghai or any other city. The people stood in the streets and looked up at the ship that could reduce them to ash in seconds. They held hands and sang songs. They refused to run. They opened fire. 12 million people died in 90 seconds. The ship moved on to Tokyo. What followed was not a war, it was a massacre. They had weapons that humanity could not match. Their shields stopped every missile and every bullet. Their beams cut through buildings like they were made of paper. City after city fell. Governments collapsed. Billions died. Survived because she was meant to survive. The resistance had planned for this. They had built bunkers deep underground, shielded from detection. They had stored supplies for decades of survival. They had trained soldiers who knew they were fighting a losing battle but fought anyway. For 10 years, humanity resisted. They fought with everything they had. They sabotaged facilities. They attacked supply lines. They made the occupation as painful as possible. Every human who died took at least one with them. It was not enough, but it was something. They grew frustrated. They had conquered 100 species across the galaxy, and none had resisted like this. Humans did not surrender when they were beaten. They did not submit when all hope was lost. They fought with their bare hands when their weapons were gone. They bit and scratched and screamed defiance with their last breaths. Then Doctor finished her work. She had been working on the project since before the invasion began. General had recruited her himself. She was the greatest physicist humanity had ever produced, and she had dedicated her life to a single goal. She wanted to give humanity a weapon that could hurt The device was not large. It fit in a room no bigger than a standard apartment. But what it did was beyond anything they had imagined possible. It created a cascade reaction in subspace, the dimension they used for faster-than-light travel and communication. Once activated, it would spread across the galaxy, destroying every ship and station connected to the subspace network. There was a cost. The reaction would also destroy Earth. It would tear the planet apart at the atomic level. Every human being on the surface would die, but they would die too, all of them, every single one across every world they had conquered. Brought the proposal to the surviving leaders of humanity. They debated for 3 days. Some argued that survival was more important than revenge. Others said that humanity's extinction was already certain, and that this way their deaths would mean something. In the end, they voted. 7 billion humans still alive, scattered across bunkers and hidden settlements and conquered cities. They voted through encrypted channels and whispered messages. They voted knowing what it would mean. The result was unanimous. Stood in the ruins of New York now, preparing to send the final transmission. They were listening. They always listened. She wanted them to hear this. The camera activated. Her face appeared on every screen across the galaxy. Every ship, every conquered world, every corner of their vast empire received her signal. She spoke slowly and clearly. Her voice did not shake. She told them the story of humanity. She told them about the caves where the first humans had painted their dreams on stone walls. She told them about the pyramids and the Great Wall and the cathedrals that reached toward the sky. She told them about the music and the art and the poetry that humans had created over thousands of years. She told them about the wars humanity had fought against itself, the hatred and the violence and the terrible things humans had done to each other. She did not hide from the darkness in human history. She showed it to them without shame. Then she told them about the love, the mothers who had died for their children, the soldiers who had sacrificed themselves for strangers, the ordinary people who had stood up against tyranny throughout history. She told them about the endless capacity of humans to hope, to dream, to believe that tomorrow could be better than today. She told them that humanity had chosen peace. When they arrived, humans had welcomed them with open arms. They had wanted to believe in friendship across the stars. They had ignored the warnings and the doubts because they wanted so desperately to not be alone. They had taken advantage of that hope. They had twisted it and used it and turned it into a weapon. They had mistaken kindness for weakness. They had thought that humanity's desire for peace meant humanity was unable to fight. They had been wrong. His voice grew stronger. She told them that humanity was not a species that surrendered. They were not a species that accepted extinction quietly. They were descended from creatures who had survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that should have destroyed them. They carried in their blood the memory of every struggle their ancestors had faced. She told them that humans had a saying, "If you want peace, prepare for war." Humanity had prepared. For decades, they had hoped for the best while getting ready for the worst. They had hidden their preparations and played the part of the trusting friend. They had waited. Now the waiting was over. She explained what was about to happen. She described the device and what it would do. She wanted them to understand. She wanted them to know that this was not an accident or a mistake. This was a choice made by every human being still alive. The High Command tried to interrupt the transmission. They tried to locate the device. They failed. Human engineers had built systems specifically designed to resist interference. They had spent decades learning how technology worked, and they had found ways to counter it. Looked into the camera. Behind her, the sky was beginning to change color. The device had been activated. There was no stopping it now. She delivered her final words to the galaxy. She spoke not with anger but with absolute certainty. Humanity had chosen peace. They had offered their hand in friendship, and that hand had been bitten. They had watched their cities burn and their children die. They had been pushed to the edge of extinction. Now they were pushing back. They would remember humanity. Every species in the galaxy would remember. They would tell stories about the small blue planet and the stubborn creatures who lived there. They would learn that some species should not be provoked. Some species would rather die than submit. Humanity was one of those species. Smiled as the sky turned white. She felt no fear. She felt only pride, pride in her species, pride in what they had accomplished and what they had endured. The transmission ended with 4 words that would echo across the galaxy for. We chose peace first, you chose wrong. The light consumed the Earth. The reaction spread through subspace at speeds beyond measurement. Across the galaxy, ships exploded in brilliant flashes. Stations crumbled into dust. An empire that had conquered 100 worlds collapsed in a single heartbeat. When the light faded, Earth was gone, but so were the other species found the transmission in the following centuries. They studied it and debated its meaning. Some called humanity monsters, others called them heroes, most simply called them a warning. The galaxy learned a lesson that day. Some species were too dangerous to enslave. Some species carried a fire in their hearts that could not be extinguished. Some species, when pushed too far, would burn the universe down rather than live on their knees. Humanity had been one of those species. The stars remembered them forever.